We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundaries. We believe in cultivating curiosity and transformation that is rooted in profound love. The COVID-19 pandemic has irrevocably shaped how connections are formed in congregations across the United States and the world. The Church of the Larger Fellowship is committed to being a resource within Unitarian Universalism and beyond. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine Quest to our online community hub and our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison. The CLF supports the ministries of those who hold target identities: Blue, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism; Trust, Transgender Religious UU Professionals Together; and Drum, Diverse Revolutionary Unitarian Universalist Multicultural Ministries, just to name a few. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed, even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Church of the Larger Fellowship. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Voices of Unitarian Universalism, also known as the VUU. Thank you, Kiana Janae Perkins. I am Aisha Hauser. My pronouns are she and her. And I am usually coming to you from the land of the Coast Salish people in Seattle, but right now I am in the land of the Nakatachank, also known as the Anacostans people, and near the ancestral lands of the Piscataway and Pamunkey peoples in Washington, D.C. And I am a middle-aged brown woman with curly salt and pepper hair, and I am wearing a kafia, which is the symbol of kafia is a scarf from Palestine, a symbol of the liberation of Palestine. So welcome, and today we have the fourth of four-part series with UU the Vote. And before I introduce our amazing guests and jump in, I want to introduce my co-host, DC. Hello, DC. How are you?
Good morning. Hey, Aisha. I'm DC Fortune. Pronouns are he, him. I am a fat, white, balding, middle-aged trans man, and I am coming to you from central Pennsylvania in the along the banks of the Susquehanna River, named originally for the Susquehannock people who were first here when the colonizers arrived. And it is now renowned as the place where Joseph Priestley came to live, here in Northumberland, Pennsylvania. And I'm doing all right. The sun is out. It's not hot. It's not cold. It's Goldilocks just right.
Excellent. She was a colonizer too, let's be clear.
Well,
so let's say that whole story, that's another view. So I want to welcome our UU the Vote folks, Nora Rassman, Democracy Strategist for Side with Love, and Nicole Presley, Director of Organizing Strategy, also with Side with Love, and the UUA sponsored the Mosaic Conference. And I think you both were there, right? Or no, Nicole, I know you were there and led quite a panel. So I don't know if you want to start just giving Nora was online and Nicole was in person. If you want to give a brief, how was it? And an overview and kudos. I was not there, but I've heard some amazing things about it.
Yes, it was a beautiful conference, and big kudos to my colleagues in congregational life and MFD for hosting this conference, planning it, and putting together really a beautiful mosaic anti-racist curriculum. The event was great. It was easeful, dare I say, at least for the participants. The music was great. The worship services were great. Panelists and discussions and workshops were all really pertinent to the moment. I feel like a lot of times we know we have a long history of different iterations of anti-racist work in Unitarian Universalism, and this one felt deeply rooted in what does anti-racism mean for us now, and how do we apply it, and not just learn, but become the people who are doing the anti-racist work. And yes, there was an amazing panel that I had the honor to moderate as a relatively new Unitarian Universalist who, when entering the faith, I heard about these names. I read their books or the ones that they edited, and these were the names that people brought up when they talked about like why Unitarian, why are there people of color here to begin with, and who did this hard, long struggle. And that was with Reverend Abi Giamachi, Reverend Bill Singford, Tequina, and Paula Cole Jones. And so just deep gratitude for them and all of their work that allow, I know me, to greatly benefit from.
Thank you. Yeah, that was actually, somebody sent me a picture of that panel. I said, oh, that was the only time I was like, oh, I didn't go to Mosaic. I did not go. And yes, definitely the folks that helped and are our elders and got us to where we are. So let's jump in. We have 2 weeks, a week and a half until this election. And I would love to hear from you both. Where are we right now in terms of you, the vote? What are some things that have been bubbling? I like the framing roses and thorns as we head into the next election season. What are the roses? What are the thorns?
Yeah, I can start. My name is Nora. I use she and her. I'm a white woman with wavy hair and wearing a tan sweater and gold necklace, and sitting in front of some indigo art and calling in from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is where I live. I love the roses and thorns. And maybe there's some buds, but maybe we can get to that at a later time, for the possibilities of growth. Broadly, I think a couple of roses and thorns that I see. I am in the context of where I live in Milwaukee, and my role as democracy strategist really pulls me into a lot of relationships with folks organizing nationally, but I do have like a pinky toe in what's happening here as well. And I think there's been a pretty significant cultural shift around how we incorporate art and music better into electoral work. There are a number of free concerts by like very famous musicians happening here over the next 2 weeks. Lil Uzi Vert is one, and a couple other very famous musicians that young people specifically, I think, will be very jazzed about. And I think that's a demonstration of kind of like, how do we creatively bring people into, like, make voting as one of many ways that we engage in, systemic change fun? And how do we ensure that people want to be part of it? Another is that I'm really inspired by the kind of like creativity that folks who was, the undecided movement and here in Milwaukee have shifted to be, our terminology is uninstructed, have really shifted to kind of like expand to like try and use these last few weeks for like, how do we continue to bring a message that is like demanding policy shift in Palestine and arms embargo immediately, and like, how do we leave it all on the dance floor, in these final days. I think I mean, a thorn is kind of the core contradiction of like how little power the left has right now. I think that we, on our first conversation, Nicole, Aisha, and we were able to talk about with Michael, I think, what we had observed and experienced at the Rising Majority Gathering, and kind of their June 2024 assessment of how much power the left as an organized body had. And so I think that a thorn and bud is probably like the possibility of growth, but like a real conversation that like, overwhelmingly voters and residents of the United States, whether or not they can vote, support a ceasefire, and over half support our arms embargo on Israel, and like elected officials are out of step with what the majority is demanding, and so I think there is the reality of also kind of, it is heartbreaking and hard to witness and be honest with ourselves about people have been trying all kinds of things at great risk to their own livelihoods and lives, and the policy hasn't shifted. So that would be a big thorn.
I think it might be helpful, and I know this is our fourth show, but we are also on a podcast in case this is someone's first time listening to folks from You the Vote. When we say the left, can you delineate, because sometimes people have make synonymous the Democrats and the left, and they're not always synonymous. So maybe delineate what we mean when we're saying the left.
Yeah. I'm sure we each probably have a couple definitions, so I'm not going to try and say that we even will agree. What I think I mean, what I'm attempting to say is distinguish a group of people who emerge from and are accountable to social movements that are committed to a more liberated world. Now, political parties could say that that's what they're about too, right? Their vision of a liberated world, unfortunately, might include major corporations dominating our electoral systems, or some people get to vote is a liberated world, and so I think that in my understanding, it is kind of like comes from the lineage of what it means to build a mass movement of people who are demanding that our society must be structured in a way that attends to and cares for people who have historically and currently are experiencing the most violence at the hands of the state and systems of oppression. And that's different than maybe, I'm sure we could draw some cute little diagrams of the overlap of people, but like I, over time, have called myself a liberal and a progressive and a leftist, and those things all mean really different things, and I think that they bring us into relationship and each come from a particular lineage. But yeah, so that's my incomplete, but I'm really curious what the rest of y'all think.
Nicole, you want to take that one?
Sure. I think one of the main features that I think Nora talks about, and when we talk about the left, is its root in working class and poor movements, as well as in people of color liberation movements with solidarities across the globe, particularly in the global South. And so I think that we are experiencing the the late stage impacts of capitalism, of a country that has been hijacked by corporate interest, as well as multiple growing wars that bring into stark relief the histories of colonization of the globe, the power of the West, right? When we're talking about Russia and Ukraine and NATO, and kind of global, I would say, awakening to a interlocking system that is not working for not only the great majority of Americans, but the great majority of people on this planet, or I dare say the planet itself, given multiple hurricanes hitting the South. And I think that those features and that solidarities, those lead to some demands that really challenge power. It challenges the money, it challenges the racial dynamic, and it challenges the stability or inevitability of national lines and how they have been drawn and maintained. And so to that end, when we're talking about the left not having power, particularly enough in this election to force a political party to change course, I think it is a big undertaking. I think sometimes we are not honest, no matter what your political affiliation is, about what is your long game, right? What is your vision? And we get afraid, right? We're like, oh no, we don't want to be radical. That's what we'll often hear from the Democrats, right? Or people who might call themselves liberal, that we don't have a radical agenda. And the vision of liberation is absolutely radical, right?
Yes.
It is life-changing and world-saving. And I think that then opens people up to be more imaginative, to adjust their political behaviors, to think about themselves in the context of community rather than individuals for survival. And so when we talk about roses and thorns, I think the rose that I see is this emergence of a different type of consciousness that isn't, America first, but might be humanity first. An awakening to building things outside of an electoral system, not an abandoning of it as a means for some change or even some relative stability, such that there is a terrain on which to organize that is not as chaotic or as death dealing. But I think it really just opens folks up to go, oh, what is the work that we would have to do to have more power if accountability seems to be lost in this two-party system?
Ooh, you both said a word. DC, what do you think?
I don't know that I can add anything really.
Okay.
For me, I mean, I grew up, I'm going to guess I'm a little bit older. I know I'm a little bit older than Aisha. I'm going to guess I'm more than a little bit older than the other two people here. And I'm struck again by how the left, the progressives, the liberals, whatever, tend to cut off our fringes for the sake of acceptability, for the sake of compromise, whereas those on the right get them their own TV network, or their own radio programs, and we tend to shut down the voices who are truly visionary in political systems, I will say, because I'm thinking, we can go back to Dennis Kucinich, who, got laughed out of town as like the Democratic Party house elf, but he was right about everything. He was right about every fucking thing. And we ridiculed him because he was unacceptably too liberal, too weird, too amazing. And we ended up with middle of the road candidates that didn't take the bold and daring action that I would have liked to see happen. So that's an old grumble of mine, but
Well, I appreciate that. I think one of the things that has been clear in the United States over the last 40 years, and well, I mean longer, but let's go with starting in 80, is that we've moved to the right,
Oh
whichever
God,
right it
yes.
is, in a way that is so destructive. So I want actually the next question for you both to be, what do you understand our collective assignment to be? I want to talk right now past the election because there's tension even within my, I don't know, I actually don't, I personally don't have, I am not upset at people who are saying I cannot vote a certain way because of genocide. I think right now, 2 weeks away, I mean, people I think have made their decision. I don't think, it's hard for me to imagine if somebody really doesn't know what they're going to do, but okay. The election is one part of our lives. So what is our collective, what did you both understand our collective assignment to be? I think that is such a poignant, and gets to what do we do now? I'd love to hear what your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think a part of it is regrounding in our imagination of what the world that we're committed to building is. And for those of us that a lot of our imagination is shaped by electoral cycles, there is a resetting that's required, right? And I see so many people eloquently saying, like, okay, do what you're going to do November 5th. Literally, what's your game plan to fight on November 6th? And I say that knowing that, like, people have been working hard and support people tending to themselves and their spirits and the profound range of emotions that people are having both leading up to this election and with whatever results there are, the grief that people will experience and the fear. And I think that part of our assignment is to stay the course and to put in context where elections fit in our broader understanding of how change actually happens. And I think for it, if you aren't in relationship with people who think elections are stupid and are anti-electoralists, I encourage you to find some because I think that the default of what I have been taught is to trust that the system is broadly functional and needs some adaptations. And I think it is really profound to be in relationship with people who are trying and practicing every strategy that we might have. And part of that is world building outside of the state. And part of that is trying to build the collective power that is needed to hold the state accountable. And I see those kind of like in relationship to each other, but oftentimes I myself have positioned them as being in conflict. And so yes, I think that there's also the like commitment to self-work and unlearning, which I think that like part of what we've touched on in past conversations is kind of like the profound ways that systems of white supremacy and colonization shape the way that we understand who the US is in the world. And it is incumbent on us as like, the climate catastrophe and wars continue on and, will happen in our name as USians, to like be clear uh, about that and like be persistent in our objections.
I want to highlight a word that Nora used, which was practice. I think the assignment is to practice that which we want to bring about. And whatever that is for you, it is the time to actually do it. One of the primary issues around political power in this country and under the systems that govern or control, whichever term you want to use for whatever moment is right, control us, is, are we ready and prepared to govern in this system or another? It is not enough to challenge power. It is not enough to dismantle oppressive systems. There, in fact, has to be something else. And we have to have the skills and the trust of people to make it happen. I think that the power that needs to be built has little to do with the threats that we are under. I think the threats have always been there. I think that we have a base building and an absorption problem. I don't think we make our movements persuasive to people. Rather, I mean, whether it's because of we don't act like people want to hang out with, or we don't practice that which we are trying to build. And therefore, if people might want to say yes to the dream, they need to say yes to the practicality, right? If we don't want police and prisons and jails, show me how you are handling conflict. Show me how you are handling and transforming harm. Give me something very clear and tangible. Give me a process and show me people who act with integrity that are holding that work. If you, like, I always tell people, I worked on many, many issues. If we had a reasonably functioning and just system, the issue that I would most like to work on is the many ways in which this country poisons us, right, through our food policy, right? But if that is your issue, then like, how are we creating urban gardens? Who's making the food and who's making it available to other people? If we know that like there in fact is already enough housing, how are we engaging ourselves in ways that create communities, right, that aren't having access housing? Who are we inviting into our homes? Who are we sheltering? Who are we inviting into our churches? What are the resources in which we ourselves are ready to liberate while we sit there and say, well, we have more than enough money, right? Tax the rich, but I will let you die waiting on us to tax the rich, right? So it is just about practice. However you can practice that world you are building, no one is saying yes to your movement unless they believe you can actually do it and that they can tolerate hanging out with you while you're doing it.
Say that, Nicole Presley. Okay, listen, you're speaking my language. I think, thank you both, because one of the things that I have committed to making a practice, because I am not necessarily good at any one thing, but my commitment to wanting a less punitive society, to prison abolition, to transformative justice means in my own life, where are the places that I'm holding on to a grudge, anger, whatever it is, right? And I'm not saying at all you don't have boundaries, you don't have to accept problematic, harmful behavior. That's not it. But there is a wide chasm between never talking to someone and pretending they're dead and having them live with me, right? Like we don't, it's not a binary of like, so, and it's the same with society. There's a huge difference between, well, here's the thing about our society. It's not the same spectrum because we do not have a society that supports people, that puts people at the center. We don't have third places where are free places for people to gather and support each other. We don't have social service networks. I'm talking about the United States. We don't have universal health care, universal basic income. And so part of, I was talking, when I talk to folks about abolishing prisons and transforming our society, I said the first two things that need to happen, well, now I say three, yesterday, are universal basic income, universal housing, and universal health care. Because once people's basic needs are met, then we can go from there. But people who have everything's been extracted from entire under-resourced segments of our population, starting with enslaved descendants of enslaved Africans, indigenous people, and then you go from there to immigrants, of which I am one. So we are such a deeply, we all know the ills of this society. I appreciate you saying, Nicole, we need to be people that others want to be around, because I've definitely been in spaces, in leftist spaces, but I'm going to take that back. In UU spaces where I have been shut down more than once by, I'm going to say it, apologies, Nora, because hashtag not all white women, but I've been shut down by white women. I've been, in a way that I'm like, this is unpleasant. I don't like anything about this. And it's not that I have to be right because I am an immigrant and I have a certain world experience. But okay, I'm going to tell you a funny story. A white woman minister one time corrected me saying sheikh. So there was someone I knew whose last name was Sheikh. And they were saying sheikh. And I'm like, it's sheikh. And they're like, well, we don't want to mispronounce their name. I said, I'm fucking Arab. Are you serious right now? Like, in what world are you, non-Arab speaker, going to correct me, an Arab speaker? But that was like clear. Like, no, they said that because you don't speak Arabic. Could we please? And that's such a simple that's an example that isn't necessarily impactful, but I don't want to be in a relationship with this white woman minister who's, you know what I mean, we may be on the same page with a lot of things, but I'm like, oh, this is odd, and I don't want to feel like I need to worry about being corrected. Okay, sorry, went down a rabbit hole, but it's to the point of like, who wants to be like the super woke person in the room, right? And I think that's what makes our spaces unpleasant, rather than what does it mean to build relationship? What does it mean to have as our center, love at the center, and also relationship building at the center, community at the center, and having difficult conversations and being okay with that, right? And so, yeah, I'm curious. We have to say hi to India. One of our friends, India, is online. Hello, India. We love you.
Hey, India.
Shout out from the VUU.
Also, can we say hi to Adam?
Hi, Adam. From
God
Florida.
bless him. He's a trans guy living in Summerfield, Florida. Whoo, baby. Yeah.
Good luck with that, Adam, for sure.
Yeah. Good luck with that, bub. We're thinking of you. Oof.
I think, Nicole, I'm curious if there are examples you have about when you were saying very accurately, and I agree, that we are, that we want to be people that others want to be around. Like, what are examples of problematic behavior that maybe we can invite people to unlearn is my point. That's what I'm getting at.
I'll do both, right? like maybe some behavior we shouldn't do all the time. Knowing that like we all have that growing edge. And then, an invitation to like, what are some questions we need to ask ourselves to show up a little better? And I think that one is, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? And that doesn't mean that you go and tell lies and give people whatever they want to hear. But when you are having religious and spiritual and political, because they're all wrapped in one, right? Conversations with people, is your end game to be right, or is your end game to invite someone into a different way of thinking, a different posture, maybe a different lens? Do you, dare I say, have willingness to learn from that conversation? I think so often we are so focused on like, we got to win and we got to dominate, or we have to do a weird persuasion that we forget about the process, because maybe that person does in fact change their mind. Maybe you browbeat them with the facts and they change their mind, but they don't want to now build with you, right? So now we just have a bunch of individuals that have the same political leaning with no infrastructure through which to funnel y'all's will. So literally take people as they are, and have a conversation where you might deign to witness their humanity, their pain, their joys, and figure out where they're coming from. Now, let me be clear, don't do that with everybody. Everybody has the person, the people that they should be talking to, right? There is somebody that can and should be doing that with white Christian nationalists.
Yeah.
There's somebody that can and should be doing that, right, with neoliberals, right? There can and should be people who need to do that within leftist communities, right? There is a person for everyone, but you have to know who, one, do it within your community. Those are the people you are already in relationship with, and also do it in ways where it is you're not just spiritually drained and harming yourself in the course of doing that. I think that just doing that, you'll find that other behaviors that I will just generally define as weird, like will kind of slowly disappear when you center a person and commit to the work that you're actually trying to do. You'll find that the other weird kind of just like personality things will work themselves out. And I think that it is about taking care of ourselves. I think so much of the time that we act as raggedy people, pretending we're doing the good base building work, it's because we're tired. It's because we're hurt. It's because we're angry and we want to yell at the person in front of us instead of the person that's actually ruining our lives. And we have to just be more self-aware to be like, oh, now I have to put this down. I don't need to have this conversation right now. I don't need to go to that speaking event. I don't need to be, in fact, the one making the calls on this phone bank today, because my rage will express itself in ways that are not useful. So tending to your grief and tending to your spirits is absolutely essential, because no one wants to join the thing if it means that they get to look and be like you. And you're clearly struggling.
Thank you for that, because I think that is where Unitarian Universalist faith communities can come in. Online worship, covenant groups. I think I appreciate that a lot. And I want to lift up the comment that I put on screen by India Harris. What infrastructure needs to be in place to build a container to the current political and economic system of the United States? So it is a question for both. That is a phenomenal question. So whichever one of you, and hopefully both of you will answer, but whichever one of you want to answer that.
That's not a question. That's a dissertation.
We could do it. I have faith in us in 20
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I can give it a first offer. I do want to just add to the conversation about kind of like unlearning and ways of being, because I think for me, what I've learned about kind of like relationship and repair orients towards kind of like what's the intention and like why are we going towards this relationship, right? Not in a transactional way, but like we all have a reason why we seek out deeper connection with another person. And I think that part of it is like when people are coming for more than they are seeking or needing, with if they don't have the self-awareness, it is hard to manage expectations. And so I'm thinking about very localized organizing spaces where people who we were working on organizing project also were seeking family because of their exclusion by their, family of origin, or also were seeking their entire social network to come through their social, their organizing. And like that creates real dissonance and conflict between people when some folks are like, I'm good on that. And I think that especially for white people, like beginning to build cross-racial relationships with BIPOC folks, I think there can be an expectation and a demand of intimacy that is just like unfair and inappropriate. That like I'm showing up. So obviously you should both be vulnerable, and you should want to be close to me. And I think a part of it is like in doing the work, there can be proof and relationship can emerge. And that is not something that's not possible. But I think that the management of expectations for like, what are we doing here? And that's like an awkward conversation, right? I'm saying this being like, most of the time, this has been like an explosion or implosion happened. And then afterwards, I feel like a group that I have been part of has been like, oh, there were some mismanaged expectations about what we were going to get from, some of us were just coming to the biweekly meetings and some of us are profoundly isolated and need a family. And like, those are really hard, different needs to meet. So I do think there is a piece around like having self-awareness about what you are seeking through relationship. And then also like to your point around what does it mean to like build a practice of being an abolitionist, like we have to have like a commitment to repair, but also recognizing that like it is not our right to keep repairing. Like doing harm time and time after again doesn't necessarily guarantee that the same person wants to keep repairing with you. And so I think there is also the piece around like what am I willing to give? Who am I trying to be here? And like maybe I myself might need a little time out. Okay, so that's just gonna be my sidebar on the relationship. Just to restate this juicy question that we've been offered, what infrastructure needs to be in place to build a container to challenge the current political and economic system of the United States? Okay. I mean, a piece of it in my mind is that many more people need to have an embodied experience of their needs being met in collective ways outside of the system of capitalism. I think that many of us are like, there are the like primary beneficiaries of capitalism. And then I think there are like many more of us who, based on our race, class, immigration status, could benefit a little or like have been trained, like this is the way to like have food and housing in the United States. You have to engage in this structure in a particular way. Maybe you get access to healthcare, maybe, TBD. But so I think part of it is kind of like looking towards people who are building alternative economic structures right now, whether they be co-ops or other more collectively owned projects where people can actually have experiences that shows them other ways are possible. And that's really hard to scale. So like when you ask about infrastructure, I'm like, okay, that's like 20 people owning a tiny plot of land in Milwaukee. And those people now know, wow, we could just share what we grow instead of having to like go to Piggly Wiggly. I think another piece of it is, yes, I do want some solidarity economics. I mean, I think another piece of it is also like the celebrity worship that kind of accompanies our relationship to billionaires. Like we do not hate billionaires enough or millionaires. Like it is like, why don't we hate these people more? And like I myself, like I have a necklace from Working Families that says eat the rich. And like sometimes I feel a little on edge when I wear it in different places in a way that I'm like, I mean, I'm with the message. I agree. Yes, totally. And also like, I'm still undoing my own shit, like, I'm just like, I'm like being an apologist for people's generational hoarding.
Hoarding. That's what we need to call it. No longer
Yeah.
am I using the words billionaire, even millionaire, money hoarders. There are money hoarders who have hoarded so much that there needs to be a show about money, because we have a show about people who are under-resourced and working through issues about collecting newspapers, but we don't have a show about the problems of money hoarding. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, keep going.
No. Yeah. So I think for me, it's like build the practice, give people opportunities to actually feel a different world, which people are doing already. You know, don't start that, look for it where you are. And then I think there is a piece around kind of like, how do we deal with our own internalization and love for, I mean, like, we have all been inculcated by the idea that like people who hoarded made good decisions, and like are, you know, it's because of their hard work, which we know it was because of like violence enacted on Black and Native folks historically, and then like the current ways that kind of big tech or anyone who's gotten rich in the last few decades is at, you know, at the exploitation of other parts of the world, if not here. So okay, curious about others. Also, I see Kathy saying, I just had a conversation with my 12-year-old last night about why not to do that sharing. It came up as, why do we even have money? The youth, man, they have these questions. Okay, next.
I do. I think it's important to say that, like, if we're going to name systems that are oppressive and anti-humanitarian, and yet we are, for our own living or comfort, dependent on them, we have a problem. We need our own things. There is a reason why when Black people built up their own communities that had folks from, you know, the poor to the rich, all living in the same place because they were Black, things did thrive, right? The dollar, you know, even under that system, circulated in that community and was contained such that many people benefited. And that is because you knew that your barber and your laundromat and your church, right? They were all there. Maybe your barber or your diner wasn't a, you know, capital P political project, but it was a low P political project that says we care about the well-being of people of color. And we, as Americans, have deeply abandoned the idea of social welfare and accountability in any system, let alone our government, which I feel like that should be the center. So you have the right, literally demanding, my church better be MAGA, my bar better be MAGA, right? There is an athletic wear company that is specifically anti-trans because evidently Nike is too like pro fluid gendering, right? Like they will literally build their own things, their own schools, their own neighborhoods, right? Their own businesses. And so they make sure that the economic power and capacity of a political project is very much contained in building in service to that project. We literally are like, we do not want our bakery to be political. We do not want any of these institutions, including our churches, to be political. And I don't mean partisan. Let's be clear. But it is absolutely okay to demand more of the institutions that you're literally invested in to say, hey, are you not secretly funding my demise?
Right.
Because I don't like that. And if we can't and do not have the immediate power to bring them down, what are we creating instead? And I always go to kind of protest encampments as really beautiful prefigurative politics, because it literally creates that which we need, right? You don't get encampments at college universities or outside police stations or at Occupy, right? Without saying, hey, we need medics who are in fact going to offer people what? Free healthcare, right? Without teachers, right? We forget that literally there are people, movement leaders, professors, right? People with wisdom who come usually to those encampments to do political education, to understand what this moment is. We have spiritual leaders that show up to this moment to tend to people's spirits. Everyone is in fact attached to institutions or communities or bodies. If we demand more from them, we can create that in real time, not just in a crisis, right?
Yeah.
Not just when we want to protest something, but when we go, well, folks need some healthcare, folks need some food, folks need some housing. We need to develop better practices and clarity around security, since like surveillance culture is everywhere. My phone is listening to this at this moment, right? What are we doing about that so that we can literally wean ourselves off of the system so that when we finally demolish it, there's actually something there?
Whew. Whew. That is so building the world we dream about. When in 2020, after the murder of George Floyd happened in Seattle, I don't know, somebody on Fox News got a bug up their ass about the Seattle protest and taking over of a neighborhood. And I don't know what people were hearing, but I'd get texts from family, most of my family, nobody's in Seattle except for my children aren't there anymore. Anyway, oh my God, are you okay? And I'm like, why wouldn't I be okay? It was this, we were still in lockdown. I'm like, well, we're in lockdown. I'm like, no, everything's going on in Seattle. I'm like, what's going on? So I went, and one of my family members was like, don't go to the protest. I said, I'm on my way right this second. I will send you pictures. So I went. There was literally a tent that said, come talk about racism, and a couch and books. There was pizza for anybody who wanted it. No money. There was a medic tent. There were speakers. There was, literally, it was a fair atmosphere. There was come learn about what structural oppression. Do you need food? And there was really no, there was folks would say, we want to give money. Okay, here you can donate, but otherwise there was never any asking for. So, I did offer stuff to the encampments of the University of Washington earlier in the spring. And so we can do it. It's not that we can't. It's that we've been conditioned into fear and because the state doesn't want us to have good things. The state is very clear we are a military state. And what we need to do is to India's question and what everyone's been saying today is continue to support the world that we know that we do in microcosm create. We know what mutual aid looks like. We've felt it. We've supported each other. I don't give to big, except for I do give to the Lavender Rights Project, which support trans folks and give pro bono law. But other than the Lavender Rights Project, I give to mutual aid. If somebody says I need money, or if I know somebody, I really try as much as I can with what I have. But I think we could do it. We are doing it. And yes, DC, you want to say what you just said? I'm gonna share in the chat a podcast that Nora just wrote about
where I just said that my brain is full. No,
Yeah.
What I said was that frightened people are easier to control and manipulate. And it is infuriating when you're trying to unfrighten people, because it takes it takes like 1 ounce of energy to scare them, and then it takes 20 pounds of energy to convince them that they're not actually in danger. They've just been lied to.
That's right.
You see what I mean? And there are days when I think we undermine our own capacity by being so fucking ethical. Like, it would be easier if we could just lie, right? But that doesn't work because of who we are. But honestly, if people believe a thing that makes them feel better about feeling out of control and scared, then they're going to believe in that rather than understand a complex truth that requires them to do some shit that is uncomfortable and scary and foreign. And people who are frightened will grasp onto stuff. I liken it to, I used to be a housing contractor, a home repair contractor. I liken it to being on a ladder against the side of a house and having the ladder start to slide. And you know it's a terrible idea, but you're gonna grab the light fixture on your way by. Okay? Like you're gonna like I'm scared. That is a terrible option, but it's the one I see in front of me, and I'm going to grab it on the way by. The ladder's going to fall, and I'm going to break the lamp thing off, and I'm still going to end up with broken bones. Right? But when you're scared, when I climbed a ladder to hang a rainbow flag at my last church, we were going through dozens of rainbow flags. They were getting stolen every time we put one up. So I made a metal one. And I also put some little spiky mat things on the thing that was holding it up, except I put the spiky mat things on before I hung the flag.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you know where this is going, right? You know where this is going. And I put them there, and I went to hang the flag, and the ladder slipped. And don't you know, I grabbed, you know those strips that you put around the edge of the room when you install carpet?
Yeah.
Those.
Mm.
So
can I
fall in the rain on Facebook Live? Oh yeah. But I also shredded my hand and then broke this arm.
Were you by yourself?
Oh no, I had an audience.
In other words,
to be fair, the number one person who was there to help me was a religious, like in any emergency, I want a religious educator. Because, honey, unflappable. Oh, there's blood. Oh, you've split your face open. Oh,
right.
You have a broken arm. All right, well, let's get the rain out of your face.
Right. I guess my it's a metaphor for so many things, but I think I do want to name, and we do this often on the show in terms of having clarity about who's learning what, right? So I think the fear is different for white people with privilege,
yes,
and people who are descendant of enslaved Africans. Like Ta-Nehisi Coates has said many, many times in every interview, I'm a child of Jim Crow. I recognize when he's talking about Israel-Palestine, I recognize what this is, right?
Right.
So we have 2 more minutes, and I definitely want Nora and Nicole to, but we will continue to talk about this because we have the election, and next week will be Halloween and a host special. So we will, deconstruct all this and continue.
Oh, we should do something fun.
But I think, I want to say, ask you both, this is the last You the Vote show before the election. What is the number one thing you want people to know right now as a sign off on our last 2 minutes? What's the number one thing? Lots of pressure. You each get to answer that.
Okay. One. I'm going to choose 2. So I think, given that wonderful story that DC told us, ask yourself the question: how much do you want to punish someone versus how much do you want to get free? Where are you going to put that energy? And the final one is, how Black men vote is not the reason why we are in the situation we are in. Let that go. Move on to something better.
Dropping in the chat that we do have some spaces that we'll be gathering, and we'll make sure that CLF lifts those up, because we would love for you to be with us to make sense of whatever happens in the days and weeks after the election. And I think it would just be kind of like, it's our work and responsibility to understand how our own identity and social location shapes the reaction that we're having to whatever happens on November 5th. And I think that the orienting towards fear and anxiety is a mistake, if that is the sole response that we're assuming that people are having, because I think it is a lot more complicated, and we must tend to and listen to people who have been profoundly harmed under, regardless of the political orientation of the president, or thinking in my context in a local context, and that's our work. And so I think assuming that there's a range and that people are making the choice that their conscience calls them to.
Thank you. Thank you both for this series. We met over the summer several times to plan all 4 episodes. I want to lift up the comment that is currently on screen. Upcoming events: Side with Love, November 6th, the day after the election. The day after the election is called. And what's happening that day, Nora?
So those are 3 events.
Okay.
If the election is not called November 6th, which is a possibility that we're planning for, we'll have 3 events. The 6th, the day after the election, whatever date that is, and Tuesday, November 19th. We'll have virtual space from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern, all of those days, to both hold the spiritual tending and political space for folks. And then on Thursday, the 21st, we're collaborating with Black Lives of VUU and Drum for somatics and more practice-based space around spiritual tending.
And November 21st, FYI, is my birthday. So, yay, thank you. And on that note, thank you everyone for joining us. And I am so grateful to be in community with you all. DC, Nora, Nicole, blessings. And I adore you all. Thank you so, so much. And thank you all for joining us on The View. See you next week on Halloween.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The View.